My name is Ryan Brooks. I'm 44 years old, and I've lived most of my life in Oregon. These days, I call Southport Bay home, a small coastal town where the fog hangs low like a secret and the ocean hums quietly in the background of everything you do. It's the kind of place where strangers wave, gossip spreads faster than wildfire, and every house has a story whether you want it to or not. I work as a senior supply chain manager for a regional logistics company that services most of the Pacific Northwest. It's the kind of job that rewards consistency and punishes improvisation. I've been good at it because I don't like surprises. I thrive on predictability, routine, things that make sense. That trait has shaped everything about my life, including the woman I married, Jenna. We'd been married nearly 10 years. She was ambitious, polished, and razor-sharp, an executive at a major pharmaceutical firm, climbing higher every year. We were the couple people called power pair at dinner parties, the type that color-coded shared calendars and managed finances like a Fortune 500 company. Our house, a white two-story near the cliffs, looked like something out of a Pacific Northwest travel brochure. We had matching espresso mugs, a spotless garage, and a Labrador named Max, who had his own designated towel rack. On the surface, we had it all. But if I'm being honest, and I mean really honest, I think we stopped paying attention somewhere around year 6. Not in a dramatic, screaming match kind of way. More like how a faucet starts dripping slowly and you get used to the sound until one day the water bill hits and you realize something's been leaking for a while. But that Thursday evening is when everything really began to shift. I had just come back from a run. My usual route took me along the coastal trail and through the woods, ending with a punishing hill that dumped me out at our street. I remember the wind that day had a bite to it. I remember the way my breath formed clouds as I slowed to a jog, sweat cooling too fast against my skin. Normal things. Familiar things. What wasn't familiar was what hit me when I stepped inside the house. The first thing I noticed was how still everything was. Not quiet, still. Like the air had been holding its breath. Then the smell hit me. It wasn't overpowering, but it didn't belong. Sharp, masculine, expensive. The kind of cologne that comes in a matte black bottle and costs more than a decent pair of running shoes. And it wasn't mine. I stood in the entryway, chest still rising and falling from the run, trying to place it. Max came padding up the hall, tail wagging like nothing was wrong. But even he slowed down like he sensed something was off. I followed the scent into the living room. That's when I saw it. A navy blazer, clean lines, expensive fabric, draped over the armrest of Jenna's favorite reading chair. Next to it, a half-full glass of red wine, deep in color, untouched. I looked around the room. The windows were open just enough to let the sea air in, like someone was trying to clear the space of something. The throw pillows were freshly fluffed, and the area rug had vacuum lines. Someone had cleaned, but not too much. Just enough to make it seem natural. Then I heard her. Jenna's voice floated in from the kitchen, light and casual like we were living inside a commercial for dinner kits. "Hey, babe, didn't hear you come in. One of the guys from work stopped by, had a last-minute meeting and needed a quiet place to take a call. He just left." She didn't appear, didn't come around the corner or make eye contact. Just kept talking like it was all perfectly normal. I walked into the kitchen. She was at the stove stirring something in a saucepan. Hair pulled back, sleeves rolled. Not a trace of guilt on her face. Calm, composed, professional. I said nothing, because what do you say to that? If I pushed, she'd have an answer. She always did. Jenna was the kind of woman who could handle a boardroom full of skeptical investors without blinking. One glass of wine and a blazer wouldn't trip her up. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut. It wasn't just the scent or the blazer. It was the way the entire house felt like it had been reset. Like someone had lived here for an hour and then tried to vanish without a trace. We ate dinner that night like we always did. Chicken and wild rice, a side salad, a glass of wine, different bottle this time. We talked about the usual things. Her upcoming meetings, a vendor issue I was dealing with, how Max had chewed through another one of his toys. Nothing heavy, nothing real, but something had shifted. Not a dramatic, blow-up fight kind of shift. More like a barely perceptible misalignment. like a picture frame nudged slightly off-center. You might not notice it right away, but once you do, it's all you can see. That night in bed, Jenna fell asleep quickly, or at least pretended to. Her breathing was even, rhythmic, her back to me. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the ocean outside our window. Usually it was a comfort. That night, it sounded like static. I kept thinking about the scent, the blazer, the wine, the open windows. Each detail looped in my mind like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit but didn't go away either. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But deep down, something had cracked. The worst part? It wasn't the fear that she might be lying. It was the fear that if she was, I had missed all the signs leading up to this moment. And I had no idea how long I'd been asleep at the wheel. They say hindsight is 20/20, but that's not true. Hindsight is worse. It's 20/20 with surround sound and slow-motion replay. It shows you everything you didn't want to see, over and over again from every possible angle. And once you've noticed the cracks, it's like you can't stop falling into them. After that night, the blazer, the wine, the unfamiliar scent in my house, I started seeing things differently. Not just in the present, but in reverse. I looked back on the past 6 months like I was scrubbing through a movie I'd seen before but hadn't paid close enough attention to. And now the jump cuts didn't feel so random. It started with her phone. Jenna had never been secretive. We'd always been that couple who left our phones face up on the table. There was no need to hide anything. We had each other's passcodes, not because we snooped, but because trust was built into our routine. Or so I thought. Then somewhere along the way, she started turning her screen over. At first, I barely noticed. A simple flip during dinner, maybe a small turn of the wrist when a notification pinged while we watched TV. I told myself it was just work-related. Her company had been under some kind of audit. Lots of pressure. Totally normal. But then she started taking her phone with her into the bathroom, the shower, the laundry room. She even took it outside when she went to water the succulents on the porch like it needed hydration too. And one morning I noticed her swiping away a message before I could read the sender's name. That was new. Her passcode changed next. She told me it was a company-wide security policy. Biometric updates, two-factor authentication, corporate stuff. And again, I let it slide. Because trusting someone is easier than questioning them. Because when you start asking questions, you can't always control the answers. Then there were the strategy breakfasts. Jenna had always been career-driven. She thrived on schedules and quarterly targets. So when she started adding early morning meetings to her calendar, I barely flinched. She said they were investor roundtables and pre-launch alignment sessions. Big words, important work. She'd dress a little sharper, apply lipstick I hadn't seen in years, and leave before the sun came up. Always in a rush, always with that same subtle smile like she was holding in a secret. She started coming back later, too. Glowing almost? Like the morning had offered her something more than productivity. Her stories were always vague. Generic, even. She stopped dropping names. No more, Amanda said the pitch went well, or George from finance is still weird. Instead, it was we discussed projections or it was productive. Robotic. Practiced. I knew that look on her face. I'd seen it when we first met. That low-simmer excitement she used to have when we'd steal away for weekend getaways, when she'd rest her head on my chest in the back of my Jeep and talk about wanting to live on the coast. She hadn't looked at me like that in a long time. Her wardrobe changed next. Gradually, then suddenly. Out went the oversized hoodies and fleece pajama pants. In came tailored pencil skirts, fitted blazers, silk blouses that caught the light in a way I wasn't used to. Her shoes got taller. Her perfume changed. Her jewelry became minimal, curated, modern. I remember asking her once half-joking, "What's with the runway vibe lately?" She laughed. Said she was just feeling herself again. That she'd been in a rut and was trying to level up. Confidence, self-care, reinvention. She even used that word, reinvent. At the time, I smiled. Encouraged her. Told her she looked amazing. But it didn't feel like reinvention. It felt like a reboot. Of someone I didn't know. And then, of course, there was the car. The white Lexus. It started appearing around our block maybe 2-3 months ago. At first, I thought it was a neighbor's guest. We live on a semi-quiet street. Most people park in their driveways or garages. But this car always sat at the end of the road, right where the hedges curve. Tinted windows. Sleek. Too clean to belong to someone from our neighborhood. It showed up on Thursdays. Sometimes Fridays. Always after Jenna had left for one of her off-site meetings. Sometimes it would still be there when I left for errands. And once, just once, I saw a man behind the wheel. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s. Sharp suit, sunglasses, no visible expression. He didn't look like he belonged there. The moment our eyes met through my rearview mirror, he pulled away. And that's when it clicked. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. And I had missed the start of it. I began keeping a journal, not out of obsession, but out of self-preservation. I needed to track it all. Because once you lose your grip on what's real, even your own memory starts to feel slippery. March 2nd, Lexus again. Jenna left early. Said she had an alignment breakfast in Seaside. Home at 3:15. Wore the black heels with the red soles. March 9th, phone on silent. She got a call in the middle of dinner and took it on the patio. Whispered. Said it was HR stuff. Didn't eat the rest of her food. March 16th. She didn't wear her ring. Said she left it by the sink. I checked. It wasn't there. That last one sat with me. Her wedding ring was already a sensitive topic. Years ago, she'd lost it on a trip to Phoenix. Claimed it slipped off while she was at the hotel pool. We got a replacement, but she never wore it consistently after that. Said it didn't feel the same. At the time, I understood. Grief has strange rules. But now I saw it differently. Now I wondered who else had seen her bare finger and what that had meant to them. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't naive. But I had let comfort lull me into sleep. I had believed that because we had routines, we had security. That because we still shared a bed, we shared a life. But sharing space isn't the same as sharing truth. And now, every night, as she brushed her teeth beside me and set her alarm for 6:30 a.m., I stared at the ceiling and wondered if the person I loved was already gone. If she had slipped out between the cracks while I was busy believing everything was fine. And the scariest part? She was still right there beside me. It happened on a Friday. Cold sky, early April. Jenna was in her usual hurry that morning. Black slacks, tailored blouse. The scent of that new citrusy perfume she'd been favoring lately. She said she had to fly to San Diego for a closed-door investor conference. 3 days, 2 nights. Hotel downtown. Panels, networking. A lot of long hours and coffee. She kissed me goodbye like it was any other day. And I let her. But I already knew. The night before, I'd done my own digging. There was no conference in San Diego that weekend. Not one listed on the event site she claimed to be attending. In fact, the event wasn't in San Diego at all. It was in Los Angeles, and it wasn't private equity or pharmaceutical innovation. It was a lifestyle expo, the kind built around tech-adjacent luxury brands. Not Jenna's world. Not officially. But it was the same weekend the Lexus had returned. This time, it parked a block over. I spotted it while walking the dog. Same tinted windows. Same driver profile. And that's when I stopped wondering. I acted. I called in a favor from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Chris Holloway. We used to be friends back in college. He went into luxury transport management, runs a private car service up and down the West Coast. He owed me a favor from a time I don't talk about anymore. I need a reservation, I told him over the phone. Discreet. LAX pickup. Friday morning. Female passenger. Name is Jenna Brooks. Use your regular screening process. Charge it under my name. No mention. Chris didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Within 24 hours, I had her itinerary. LAX pickup to the Langmore Hotel in downtown LA. Passenger, Jenna Brooks. Scheduled at 10:35 a.m. She'd booked the ride through a client account, under her company's name, but she'd paid for it personally. Another red flag. I added something to that car before she ever stepped foot inside it. Under the rear passenger seat, tucked behind the emergency toolkit, I left a small black velvet box. The kind you get from a jewelry store, the kind meant for moments that matter. It used to hold our wedding rings. Inside was just one now, mine. Hers had supposedly been lost 2 years ago on a business trip to Phoenix. She said it must have slipped off at the hotel pool. We searched. We mourned the loss like it was a pet. Then she stopped wearing the replacement. Said it didn't feel right. Now, after everything, I finally understood why. Beside the ring, I left a note. Nothing dramatic. No threats. No desperate pleas. Just a sentence. This was supposed to stay between us. That was all. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted her to know that I knew. And I wanted her to face what she'd been avoiding in the silence between us. Later that day, Chris sent me the footage. The company had dash cams for safety, all of which included cabin views when passengers didn't opt out. The clip was under 3 minutes. I watched it once all the way through. Then I watched it again. Jenna entered the car at LAX, sunglasses on, hair tied up. She looked put together, calm. She sat in the back and placed her phone on her lap. The car pulled away from the terminal. About 3 minutes in, she shifted in her seat, bent down to adjust something. That's when she found it, the box. She froze, fingers resting on the edge of the velvet lid. Slowly, she opened it. Her expression didn't change right away. She just stared. Then her hand covered her mouth. Her posture collapsed slightly, like a thread had been pulled out from her spine. Her phone buzzed. She didn't answer it. Then the door on the opposite side opened. A man slid in beside her. Tall, early 40s, neatly trimmed beard, expensive watch, confident, comfortable, like he'd done this a dozen times before. He didn't look at the camera. He looked at her. She tried to hide the box, tucked it between her thigh and the door as if she could unsee it by concealing it. But her eyes stayed on his face. He leaned in. Close. Said something I couldn't hear. His hand rested lightly on her knee. Familiar. In asterisk mate. She didn't flinch. She closed the divider between the back seat and the driver. The feed cut off after that. I didn't need to see more. It wasn't rage I felt. It wasn't even pain, not in the way I expected. It was finality. A strange kind of stillness, like when you realize the storm has already passed and all that's left is to walk outside and assess the damage. I closed my laptop, sat back, let the silence wash over me. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was heartbroken, though I was. Not because I was angry, though that too had its place. But because I was standing at the end of something that had once been everything. And I was trying to decide how to say goodbye to a life that had already stopped being mine long before I realized it. The next morning I packed a bag. Not a lot, just essentials. Running shoes. A few changes of clothes. The old notepad I used to keep in my glove box for work notes. I wasn't leaving for good. Not yet. But I couldn't stay in the house where everything felt like a lie in drywall form. I left a note on the kitchen counter. Just a short line. You'll know why. I didn't wait for her flight to land. I didn't care what excuse she'd spin or how carefully she'd craft it. I knew the difference between a mistake and a pattern. And this was woven into the seams now. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't need advice. Didn't need a pep talk. I needed air. Distance. A place to sit and finally listen to the voice I'd been ignoring for months. The one that kept whispering. She's not yours anymore. So I got in my car. Turned north. Let the miles put space between me and the woman I used to believe in. By the time the city faded into mist and forest, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. Not peace, not yet. But something close. And I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the first clean break. I didn't go home. After leaving the note on the kitchen counter and tossing my bag in the back seat, I just started driving. No map. No GPS. No destination keyed in. I knew I needed to get away, not just from the house, not just from Jenna, but from the version of myself who would have stayed. Who would have waited for an explanation, or worse, forgiven one. I headed north, past Seaview and through back roads I hadn't taken in years. Towns blurred together. Gas stations. Rusting farm signs. I drove with the windows down even as the evening chill crept in. Something about the cold kept me tethered. It reminded me I was still here, still breathing, even if I didn't know what came next. Somewhere past midnight, I pulled into a lakeside motel just outside Astoria. The sign buzzed with tired neon, red letters blinking one at a time like it was struggling to remember what it was supposed to spell. Rooms it finally settled on. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. She handed me a key and pointed down a hallway with cigarette-scarred carpeting and flickering lights. Room 6. I turned the key and stepped inside. It was nothing special, queen bed, small TV, wallpaper that looked like it had given up. But it was quiet. No wine glasses. No cologne. No reminders. And that made it perfect. I dropped my bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the floor for a long time. The air was thick with silence, the kind that's louder than traffic. Louder than voices. I grabbed the notepad from my bag, the same one I used to jot notes during site inspections back when problems felt solvable and answers came with spreadsheets. I flipped to a blank page and wrote a heading. What I know now. Under it, I listed the details like evidence at a crime scene. I needed to see them in black and white, needed to remind myself this wasn't a dream I could wake up from. The cologne, not mine. The blazer on the chair, too clean to be forgotten. The untouched wine, still breathing in the glass. The open windows, an attempt to erase. Her phone, face down, always. The passcode change. The early meetings. The vague explanations. The glow when she came home. The changed clothes. The white Lexus. The man in the car. The ring she never wore. My ring in the box. Her silence after seeing it. Each one was a stitch in the same pattern. None of it could be explained away anymore. I sat with that list for what felt like an hour. Then I flipped the page and wrote another heading. What I don't know. When it started. How long it's been going on. Whether she ever really wanted to stop. What she told him about me. If she told him anything at all. If she regrets it. If she ever loved me or just the version of me that kept things easy. If I missed the warning signs too soon or chose not to see them. That second list was harder to write. Not because the answers mattered more, but because I knew I'd never really get them. And maybe that was part of the punishment, not just losing the life we built, but being haunted by the gaps I could never fill. My phone buzzed from the nightstand. I hadn't looked at it since I left the house. 10 missed calls. 6 messages. All from her. The subject lines were like distant sirens. Ryan, please call me. Can we talk? I didn't mean for you to see that. Please. Just talk to me. One text simply said, I'm sorry. I didn't know how to stop. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Then I powered the phone off completely. I didn't need her apologies. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because the truth is, there's a difference between someone hurting you and someone choosing to keep hurting you, day after day, with silence and omission. Jenna hadn't made one mistake. She'd made a series of decisions, each one a little more selfish, a little more deliberate. It's funny how grief doesn't hit like you expect. It wasn't rage that sat with me in that motel room. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was something quieter. Something slower. Like realizing your house has termites, not because you saw one, but because the floor creaked under your foot and didn't quite hold. That's what our marriage had become. A house with too many hollow spots beneath the paint. I lay back on the bed, eyes on the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. I thought about the first time I met Jenna. She'd been standing by a tray of shrimp cocktail, arguing with a stranger about whether or not it was ethical to test sleep medication on lab rats. She was passionate, precise, beautiful in a way that felt unapproachable. And yet somehow we fit. At least, I thought we did. Maybe we'd stopped fitting a long time ago and just got good at pretending. The hardest part about losing someone slowly is that you start losing pieces of yourself along the way. Small parts like trust and laughter and the way you used to say their name without thinking about it. Now, even her name felt heavy in my mouth. That night, I dreamt I was back in the house, but it wasn't mine. The rooms were different, walls knocked out, strange furniture, windows I didn't recognize. Jenna was there, but she walked past me like I was a guest. She opened the door, and the man from the Lexus walked in. He took her hand. They didn't say anything. I woke up before the dream ended. Heart racing. Sheets twisted around my legs like they'd been trying to keep me anchored. In the dim light of the room, I sat up and breathed deep. The silence was still there, but now it felt different. Not empty, just undisturbed. And then I wrote one more thing in the notepad. This was never about someone else. It was about the version of herself she could be without me. That hurt more than anything. Because it meant that even if he hadn't come along, someone else might have. Eventually. Because maybe she wasn't running toward him. Maybe she was just running away from us. The sun started to rise around 6 a.m. I opened the door and stood barefoot on the concrete, watching the first light spill across the lake. The air was cold and the silence stretched wide. For the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet tears for the things that wouldn't come back. Not just her, but the version of me that believed she always would. I waited 3 days. I don't know why exactly. Maybe I was buying myself time. Maybe I wanted to give her space to fill the silence she created. Or maybe I just couldn't face the house until I knew I could walk through it without falling apart. When I finally did return, it wasn't out of longing. It wasn't about hope or second chances or any fantasy of reconciliation. It was logistics. Practicality. I had things to collect. Items I needed to move on, documents, clothes, the hard drive with 15 years of personal photos I didn't want to leave behind. I parked on the street. I couldn't bring myself to pull into the driveway. It felt symbolic somehow, as if reclaiming my space would be a lie. As if returning through that familiar garage door would mean pretending nothing had happened. The house looked the same. That was the first punch in the gut. It hadn't collapsed. It hadn't burned down in my absence. The windows still framed the ocean. The hydrangeas she planted last spring were blooming, defiantly beautiful. But something felt off. The soul of it was gone. I unlocked the front door and stepped into a vacuum. That's the only way I can describe it. The air felt sterile, scrubbed clean, like someone had tried too hard to erase any evidence of what had happened. The living room had been tidied, couch pillows fluffed, a candle burning, something neutral and new, probably bought just for this occasion. The wine glass from that Thursday was gone, of course. No blazer, no cologne. Jenna was there, standing in the entryway, dressed in jeans and a sweater that hung loose on her frame. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup. She looked exhausted, hollow. She didn't speak, just watched me cross the threshold like I was a stranger, like I might vanish if she blinked too hard. I didn't speak either. There were no words left between us that hadn't already been used up or discarded. I moved past her without touching anything, without asking questions. The house creaked under my feet like it, too, didn't know what to make of my return. I went upstairs. Our bedroom was immaculate, bed-made, my side still undisturbed. The closet door slightly open, as if to remind me there was still a half-empty space where my shirts had hung. I opened a drawer and found everything just as I'd left it. Socks folded, underwear in a neat stack. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. I grabbed 2 duffel bags and filled them with only what I needed. Clothes, toiletries, a few books, my passport, the box of letters my mom wrote me before she passed. I left the rest, not out of anger, out of detachment. Everything else felt like it belonged to someone else now. Someone who thought anniversaries meant forever and that trust could survive on cruise control. I didn't touch the framed photos. The ones on the hallway wall showing us in Italy, at the coast, in that cabin we rented for her birthday. Those moments were real once, but now they felt like props from a show that had been quietly canceled mid-season. Downstairs, I stopped at the doorway, bags slung over my shoulders. Jenna hadn't moved. She looked like she wanted to say something, but her lips pressed together, the words caught behind them like leaves in a drain. I nodded once, not with anger, not even with forgiveness, just finality. She blinked, and I saw the tears gather in her eyes, but none fell. That was her choice. Silence until the very end. And honestly, maybe it was the most honest moment between us in months. I stepped outside. The wind off the ocean caught me by surprise. Cold, bracing, like it was trying to shake me back to life. I took one last look at the house. That white facade. The porch swing we never got around to fixing. The upstairs window that faced the sea, where I used to watch storms roll in and feel safe, knowing someone was inside waiting for me. Now it was just a structure. Walls and beams and stories that no longer belonged to me. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't leave tire marks on the driveway. I didn't throw my ring into the ocean or set anything on fire. I just left. Sometimes walking away is the loudest thing you can do. Back in the car, I sat for a few minutes, my hands on the wheel, engine off. A single message had come through on my burner email. I hadn't checked it since the motel. Jenna must have remembered it from years ago when we coordinated a surprise trip. The subject line was blank. The body of the message read, "I don't know what to say that won't sound like too little, too late, but I need you to know, I never stopped caring. I just stopped knowing how to be who I was supposed to be." I didn't reply, not because it wasn't sincere. Maybe it was. But sincerity doesn't undo betrayal. It doesn't erase the months I spent thinking we were fine while she was slipping into someone else's world. One day at a time. I closed the message, started the engine, and drove. This time I didn't take back roads. I didn't drift aimlessly. I knew where I was going. A friend of mine had a place up in the hills, an old family cabin just off the edge of a pine forest. Secluded, quiet. He'd offered it to me once years ago when I needed to get out of town after my dad's stroke. I hadn't taken him up on it then. Now it felt like the only place that made sense. 2 hours later, I pulled onto a gravel path, tires crunching under pine needles. The cabin stood between two massive trees, modest but sturdy. Smoke from a neighboring chimney curled into the air. No one else around for miles. It didn't smell like wine or perfume. It didn't remind me of her. It smelled like earth and wood and beginnings. Inside, the place was rustic. A stone fireplace, mismatched furniture, a kitchen that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. But it felt alive. Honest. I unpacked slowly, put my clothes in drawers, hung my coat by the door, set my notepad on the table. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just breathed. For the first time in what felt like weeks. The silence here didn't haunt me. It held me. Outside, the wind rustled the trees. A squirrel darted across the steps. In the distance, I could hear the soft trickle of a stream. And I stood in the doorway of this unfamiliar place and whispered to myself, "This is mine now. Not the betrayal. Not the regret. Not the version of me that stayed too long in a story that had already ended. Just this moment, this breath, this space between who I was and who I might still become." A few days after settling into the cabin, I returned once more to retrieve a final box I'd forgotten. On the kitchen table, in the house that no longer felt like mine, sat an envelope with my name in Jenna's handwriting. Inside, a letter 3 pages, folded neatly. No excuses, no pleas, just truth. She wrote that the unraveling hadn't been sudden, that the man I saw wasn't just a fling, but a reflection of something she'd lost in herself. She didn't blame me. She blamed the space between us that grew slowly, silently. "It wasn't that I stopped loving you," she wrote. "It's that I stopped choosing that love every day." There was no request for forgiveness. Just the recognition that love dies not from a single betrayal, but from 1,000 unspoken exits that I end the quiet of the forest. I learned to live again. I made breakfast without checking the clock. I ran under tall pines instead of oceanside fog. The air didn't smell like her anymore. It smelled like earth and wood smoke and freedom. I stopped wondering what Jenna felt. Her messages slowed, then stopped. And still I didn't respond. Not out of bitterness, just clarity. I made a list what still belongs to me. My voice, my peace, my dignity, my future. Some people say healing is loud. Mine was quiet, like a door closing softly behind you, and knowing you'll end.